Welcome back to our Wine Barrel Patio Bar build. There's our legs that we've cut out. We'll be mounting those to the bottom of the wine barrel. Uh, and they're yellow cedar. And they're solid. There's no knots in them. So if you're doing one of these projects, because you actually have a lot of weight that's suspended on them, so you want to use good products. So what I do is I've got the top already marked in 4 areas where I'm putting the legs. And what I did there is I took a piece of plywood and I span it from side to side, and I put up one leg where I wanted the height to be, and then I transfer that mark onto the plywood and went all the way from one side to the other side. And now you can see I've got some painter's tape there that marks a parallel line. So I'll just clamp that on, and then I can clamp the opposite leg on the other side, and it will be the exact same height. I'm using the bottom of the barrel as a guide for where the legs go. You can't really use a level or square at any point. So I'll just bring that down to the line, and then I can just clamp that on and screw through the top. So what I have is some temporary screws there in the top. So I've drilled through the hoop and the wood there in the top, and then I'll just fasten my screws to it. So I've got it clamped on, and I'm just putting them on. So you can see I've already got 2 mounted, and now I'm doing the same thing. And that plywood is sitting right on top of the barrel hoop, and you can move it all around. And I'll just mount the opposing leg on the other side here. If you're mounting legs on the bottom of the barrel, this is a really quick way of doing it. There you go. You just clamp it along. I can move it along until I find the area that I want to fasten it to on the barrel. And just double check them, and now I'll just lay a 6-inch board across the top of the barrel. I'm just showing you that I was using the Craig screws. They've got a washer head built in the top of the screws, and those are porcelain screws, so they won't rust or corrode. And there's my flat board laid across the top. And what I'll do now is just take a framing square, lay it on top of the board, and then I can go up against the leg and follow it all the way down. And I'll put some marks on the barrel with some painter's tape once I get them squared up, and I'll go all the way along, square each leg, and mark it off, and then I can move the legs out of the way. I'll be putting 2 more screws in the top of the leg, and those screws I use, they're a screw that has a washer head on them, and they're used in timber framing, and so we'll be using those on the inside of the barrel. And I said I'll just put a couple of marks with painter's tape along each side of the leg, and then I can move them out of the way, and then just drill a couple of pilot holes through the barrel, and then move the leg back in place, and then screw them from the inside. So I'll just continue all the way around, and then we can get them all marked off. And you want to square each leg as you go. Don't try and square them all at once. Do one, finish it, and go on to another one. You can see the painter's tape that I've got there. Like I said, I can just tilt it out of the way, and I'll make 2 pilot holes. I'll go right to the inside, and then I can put 2 more screws on the inside. And they also have washer heads on them, and they're used a lot in timber framing. putting in a 2.5 inch number 10 screw. They were supplied by Windsor Plywood as well for this project. Windsor Plywood supplied me with all the materials I needed to complete this project. There's the screws there. These are designed for the exterior as well. You can see the nice big heads on them so they won't pull through the oak. And they have a drill bit in them, so I don't have to pre-drill the legs, so I can just drill right through and fasten them. So we've fastened them, and you can see the hinge plates now for the doors. They've been installed. And what I have here is I go a full drawing for my skirt. There's a skirt that's going around this barrel. And so what I do is go to a full drawing. I draw out my radius. This is a octagon that we're making, and I draw the size of the material that I'll be using as well. I'll be using 2x8s. So what I want is my inside leg measurement. So that's the short leg of the cutoff. You can see I have a mark there. And so that mark I'll be wanting at 9 7/8. And I'm just laying out all my pieces on my full pattern here, and checking to make sure that it's working right. And all these are cut at 22.5 degrees because we're making a octagon. So I'm cutting my dados here. What I'm using is just a single blade. A lot of times I'll just do this and then I'll move my fence over rather than setting up the dado blade. And I've got a push block there. I'm just moving my fence to make it a little bit easier so it runs all the way through, just checking it. And so my push block there, I've got a shoe on the back of it, and it helps push the product through on the dado. And I've got the tops of them all marked. And I just put another mark on them as I cut them to make sure that I'm cutting the right size. You don't want to turn them around whenever you're doing it. It's just showing you the shoe there on the back of the push stick, and I can push it up tight. Whenever you're doing this, you want to make sure that you're as square as possible on your dados, so whenever you put your spleens into them, that they're not going to force up the wood on the other side. So if I was doing a lot of them, I'd set up my dado blade, but this works good. And then I'll just move my blade over 1/8 of an inch, and that'll give me a 1/4 inch dado that I can run my spleens into. And I've cut the spleens out of the same material as well, so it'll be a fur. So there it is. I fitted it again, and what I'll do is make sure that they're all marked. I'm just tapping them in to see if they need to be tuned up a bit, but they all work perfectly. So you can see they all line up on all the corresponding angles. And whenever I'm happy with it, I'll mark each piece. So you want to put some line marks and number them. So when I take them all apart and start putting the spleen in, they'll all match up again. I'm just showing you here. So I've marked them all, and I actually put in a temporary block on the inside, and I marked my radius. I used a Sharpie so it would stand out more for you. And here it is here. I'm just gonna, once I've had all the pieces all marked, and I measured where this lies on the barrel from the top, and measured the angle, and say 7-degree angle. So I've tilted the bandsaw at 7 degrees, and like I said, I've marked all the tops of the pieces because you want to make sure that you know what side you're cutting on. It's pretty obvious though with the the black mark of the Sharpie. But I'll continue and cut all these, and then I can glue it all together, put all the spleens in. I'm taking my time to follow the line relatively close. I don't want to sand these. It's hard to sand on an angle, so I'll just take my time and follow it all the way through. There we go, we've got them all done. We'll go over to the table and fit them all. There we go, we've got them all back on the table. And I continue to lay them out on the pattern that I drew out, and then I can follow it all along to make sure. And I marked the pattern of what piece and where I started so that they go back in the same area. And what I did is I cut spleens of the same product, and I've cut it so that the grain goes along with the product and not lengthwise, so that it would snap. This way it'll be a lot stronger. And then when you're gluing like this, there's not a tremendous amount of strength on end grain. So I'll glue both sides of the end grain, get lots of glue into the channel and onto the spleen biscuit that will be going in there. I glue the bottom and the top and glue it all the way along. What I'm using here is Titebond glue. It's Titebond 3 because this will be outside more than likely. And what the glue will do too is it'll size and seal all the end grains of the wood and stop any moisture from getting in there. So I'm adding quite a bit of glue. I'm not worried at this point of wasting any glue. I'd rather it on than not be on. And you really want to saturate your end grain. But the real strength of this will come from the spleen. Then you have edge grain and edge grain glued together, so it makes it quite strong. So we just continue here and do from joint to joint. And like I said, on top of these, they're all marked right and left. And when I had them all dry fitted, I've laid out my clamp there. After I glued them all up and had the ring together, it sat overnight. And then when I put it on the barrel, you'll find that the barrels do not have a perfect radius to them. So I'm just looking for the washer, the right width, and what I use is washers when I'm trying to follow the angle of something. So you can see, because I want this to go tight, it's going to be visible at that joint. So I want it to be as tight to the barrel as possible. So I've got a mark on the barrel and on the hoop, and what I actually use is a brass screw. I put a screw on the inside of the hoop and on the barrel, and that's so that the hoop, if it comes off or goes on, will always go in the same spot. You can see here I'm using a washer just to follow all the way along, and I've used the washer that's going to work the best. So. And once I've got that all marked, I'll take it off and then take it to the bandsaw and cut the ring off it all the way around. You can see that I've got it marked all the way around, and you can see there's big gaps on the side. That's because when the barrels are laid on their sides, they may lay on their sides for 5, 10, 15 years, and they'll start to spread out a bit on the sides. They're more than likely built as round in the beginning, but when they do lay down on the sides, they go to shape. But I wasn't happy with those gaps, so what I'll be doing is taking it off and taking it to the bandsaw. I've set up a jig so that I can lay it on top, and I know the angle that I need, so there's the arm. It's off the table. You can see that I've mounted the table with a clamp, and I've checked to make sure it's parallel because the bandsaw is set up at a 60-degree angle. Just tied it to the drill press there so it doesn't pull over. And there it is. It's laying on that jig. The table's tilted. Now I can just run around and just trim that wee little bit off. There's only 2 or 3 spots that I'll have to trim off, and I'll just follow right along. And this is the only way that I thought that I'd be able to do it. And every barrel will be a bit different, so it depends on the person, I guess, that's doing the project. If you're not that fussy about the gaps, or if you want to put a trim piece all the way around, there's another option. But this worked for me. It didn't take very long to set up the arm for the table. And I did this on my smaller bandsaw rather than the big one. The smaller one works good for this. And it wasn't all of them. I think I've only had to trim off about 4 pieces. So, and then once we get this done, we'll just airs the edge all the way along, and then sand it, sand all the top, and this is the day after as well, so I've given it a long time. I wanted the glue to sit in really good. At this point, there's no nails, there's no mechanical fasteners at all. All it is the spleen and the glue. So, and it's actually quite strong when you build something like this, and it's spleens will give a piece of timber a tremendous amount of strength. Here we are, just trimming off the last piece, and that looks good. Just doing some fine work there. I've taken it off and just sanded it up. And you see, once it gets sanded off, it's first a beautiful timber. I tried to mark the grain. I don't know if you noticed, but as I was following along, I didn't mix them all up. I marked each panel out so that the wood grains would follow along. I just thought that would be a nice feature. And as you can see here, you can see how all the edges all pick up on each other. I'm just giving it a final sand, and then we'll fit it to the barrel. And here again, I'm just using the soft base sander. I can do all the joints and everything, and I'll sand this all down to 150 and do all the edges. And we've already cut off the spleens that were hanging out on the outside, so we can sand them all off as well. And then this will get everything nice and smooth. These automotive sanders really work good, especially with the soft plate on the bottom of them. I've turned them down. I don't run them at full speed. They're a little bit too aggressive for wood, but they're not Velcro. They're sticky backs on them, so they don't, sandpaper doesn't fly off. And to change them out, you just use a hair dryer and heat them up. And just follow all the way along, and then once we get this done, we'll just give this a coat with a spar varnish as well. And like I was saying earlier, I always thin my first coat out about 20% with mineral spirits. And you know it's going to saturate in. But that's part 2, so we'll get this on the barrel and do the completion on part 3. Hope you're going to stay along and watch the finished product. Thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.